Good afternoon. We will start with the first lecture of this year's project, and the first lecture topic is a warm-up and update. So we will try to discuss general concepts of the warm-up, to present some new ideas, and to try to underline the importance of warm-up procedures for injury prevention and also for the preparation for the main part of the training session. So we will start with the first slide. You know that the warm-up, it is well recognized for decades or maybe centuries now, that the warm-up is generally recognized as the part of the training session, as some 5, 10, 15 minutes introduction to main part of the training session. And basically it is believed that warm-up is needed or welcome in order to prevent injuries and in order to enhance performance. It is well known for decades now, based on some previous research done a couple of decades ago, that indeed if some athletes don't warm up before the athletic performance, most likely he will not be able to produce his best results or to have his maximal effort. Also, some scientific articles and both practical experience showed us that maybe warm-up is linked to decreased injury risk. So generally warm-up is considered the integral part of training session. For decades, we had some so-called old structure of the warm-up that consisted of generally 3 to 5 minutes some cardio workout or large muscle group activation in order to increase the temperature level. That is the general idea about the warm-up procedure, following with 5 to 7 minutes of static stretching and maybe 5 to 7 minutes of some sport-specific warm-up in order to recollect neuromuscular patterns and neuromuscular pathway to be able to execute technical tactical aspect of sport-specific activity later during the game or during the training session. But and that was some regular practice considering warm-up for decades until early 2000, when some articles were published in the late 90s or start of the 21st centuries, indicating that static stretching before the general main part of the training session maybe is not recommended. Basically, those few and then more and more articles that were published at the time showed us that static stretching before the game or practice could possibly diminish performance. So it is connected with some physiological aspects, decreased stiffness of muscular tendon unit most likely will decrease maximal strength and power. And basically those were the study findings, that if you do static stretching before the warm-up, most likely you will be in danger to reduce level of vertical jump, reduce absolute strength, and reduce level of speed and agility performance for a couple of tens of minutes during the main part of the training or during the game. So based on those findings, at the start of the 21st century, we changed the traditional warm-up procedures, and based on these new findings, these new warm-up procedures now at the time were consisted of 3 to 5 minutes jogging or doing some cardio, low-level cardio workout, and then do some dynamic warm-up to exclude static stretching in the warm-up procedure. And after this dynamic warm-up procedures, we proceeded again with sport-specific warm-up. And at the start of the 20th century, for a good 10 or 15 years later, this was the modern way of warming up, and all over the world, in all over the sports, across the sports, individual, team sports, you could easily see this new trend of warming up. But again, a couple of years ago. There is a new trend guided mainly by a couple of famous strength and conditioning coaches from the North America, Michael Boyle and his associate. And this new trend of warm-up now suddenly consists of some 6 parts of the warm-up procedures. And now when you look at the top-level athletes across the sports, you can see that there is more complex warm-up consisting on several stages. And those stages are foam rolling, and after that you have active isolated static stretching. After that there is some part of warm-up that is called the glute activation. We will give a little bit more focus in this topic about the glute activation. And after that we will do well-known dynamic warm-up. After that we have again something new that was never seen before in the warm-up practice, that now is called the movement preparation and neural activation. And most likely we could finish the warm-up procedure with sport-specific warm-up. So let's discuss a little bit each stage of this new trend of the warm-up procedure. What about foam rolling? Foam rolling is a well-known procedure nowadays. Now we use it almost 10 years now. And generally, the basic idea is to have a self-massage before the starting of the main practice session. And we have this from the physiotherapy field. Basically, what is the rationale for including self-massage or foam rolling before at the start of warm-up? Generally, the idea is to get rid of the trigger points that we could earn during the previous practice or previous match or training session. Those trigger points most likely could disturb our proprioceptive ability and our balance ability in our body. So maybe it is a good idea to try to get rid of those trigger points. One way to get rid of these trigger points is well-known massage, but we cannot use masseuse. Of course, it's not cost effective. So those physiotherapists and guys from strength and conditioning coach, they invented those rollers or foam rollers that could be used for the self-massage practice. So there is a good rationale that maybe using this foam rolling, we can decrease trigger points in the muscle. And when you decrease the trigger points in the muscle, when we have a trigger points in the muscle, we can produce decreased flexibility status, earlier onset of fatigue, and slower recovery. So this is general idea. To get rid of the trigger points, we can use self-massage or foam rolling to increase the balance, to increase proprioceptive ability of the CNS, central nervous system, and to mildly increase temperature. It should last 3 to 7 minutes. And the name of the game about foam rolling is muscle fascia. You see, this muscle fascia is a new trend. It's a hot topic for the past 10 years in sports science generally, and mostly presented by a great book by Thomas Myers, Anatomy Trains. I highly recommend this book for a read for every serious strength and conditioning coach or physiotherapist. And this fascia, it's generally a connective tissue. It's a spiderweb-like material, very strong. And in this fascia, we can accumulate fatigue, we can accumulate trigger points, and also this fascia maybe will not, after the hard training session, will be dislocated somehow in our body, you know. And the self-massage, the foam rolling, is used exactly for this, to iron this, not literally, yes, but you can imagine it, something like this, to iron the muscle fascia, to bring it back to normal state, to get rid of the trigger points in order to be able to produce maximum effort during the general training, main part of the training session. So foam rolling, you can see the picture on this slide. Generally, it is 5 to 7 minutes, 2 times 30 seconds per muscle group, with medium to high frequency level in order to increase flexibility and issues that we discussed earlier on. After this foam rolling, there is second part of new warm-up procedure called active isolated static stretching. And again, static stretching is backed in a warm-up procedure because there are some new findings that if you want to maximize static stretching effects to increase the level of flexibility of the muscle, maybe you should use static stretching while muscle is not too hot. Not cold, but not too hot. So stretching, this active isolated static stretching is using fact that you can increase the level of flexibility, plastically increase the level of flexibility, and this effect will prevail if you are using static stretching while muscle is not too hot. So we have two physiological explanations about this, but generally this active isolated static stretching seems to be a very effective procedure for increasing range of motion, and this is mainly the reason why it is back in warm-up procedure. But what about strength or power deficit that we were discussing that were induced by using static stretching? Well, new findings said that if after static stretching you do some kind of activation, those negative effects will diminish. So this is the reason why we have a third part of the warm-up procedure called the glute activation. Glute activation is a new thing in the warm-up procedure, and we will discuss it just in few sentences. Basically, when we are discussing the glutes, most likely we are discussing the most important part of human athletes' musculature. Why? Because the glutes are the powerhouse of running, changing direction, vertical jumping, deceleration, and acceleration. Basically, glutes are consisted of three muscle groups, which are functionally two muscle groups generally: gluteus maximus and gluteus medius and minimus, which we can treat as one muscle generally. So when we are discussing gluteus maximus, in every good anatomy book, you can see that the first sentence about gluteus maximus is that glute maximus is a primer mover of hip extension, and running is hip extension motion pattern. So gluteus maximus is mostly responsible for producing force during horizontal running. In concentric, its general function is a hip extension, outward rotation, and leg abduction. In eccentric movement pattern, gluteus maximus is responsible for deceleration of hip flexion, outward rotation, and abduction. But what is very important is that in isometric muscle action, gluteus maximus is one of the most engaged muscles to be responsible for knee stability through iliotibial band. So gluteus maximus is very important. Not less are important gluteus medius and minimus. Gluteus medius and minimus are important for the dynamic stabilization of pelvis during one leg stance, during walking and running. And gluteus medius is also important for hip abduction, extension and outward rotation. What is most important, maybe for athletes, is if you have a good eccentric control of gluteus medius muscle, you will be able to withstand forces that are forcing knee to neo-valgus position. So good activation of gluteus medius most likely will decrease the chance of getting injuries in the knee. So, but okay, this is a short notice about anatomical aspects of gluteus medius maximus and minimus. But so what? Well, there is one very interesting story. One very famous Czech physiotherapist, Vladimir Janda, who is his famous physiotherapy school. Janda's school is now maybe the leading physiotherapy school in the US and worldwide. He said some 30 or 35 years, 40 years now ago, he said one interesting sentence based on his practical experience, he said that whoever come to him with some problems, some issues that are beneath the hip region, he said that he can for sure tell one thing, that those clients that he sees have glute amnesia. They cannot control, they cannot activate gluteus maximus or gluteus medius or minimus muscles. So he noticed this few decades ago, and he also elaborated a little bit on this issue, and he had some basic explanation. He said that they are mechanical and central nervous system explanation about this interesting phenomenon. Mechanical explanation is that we are most likely not using gluteus maximus muscles enough these days, because those muscles are doing nothing in modern humans. In past time, those gluteus maximus had very important function in hunting during earlier period of humans. They were a turbo injection after hours of fast walking or running, when quadriceps and hamstring muscles get fatigued. Then older humans, they changed the biomechanics of walking, inducing activation of gluteus maximus. So we were walking or fast walking or slowly running, mostly on activation of gluteus maximus. And this is why you can see on this picture how these Bushmans, from Africa, they have strong gluteus maximus because they still live the same way as they were living, I don't know, a couple of thousand years ago. Nowadays, we are not using gluteus maximus, and moreover, because we have a neural inhibition of gluteus maximus. Why? Because of our way of living. You see me now, I am sitting, and most of us sitting most of the time of the day. We have a shortened hip flexors, which reciprocally inhibit the glute region. And when you inhibit the glute region, you cannot use them after a while. And if pain occurs anywhere in the lower body, there is one physiological mechanism in our brain. It will decrease the level of activation of the most powerful muscles of the lower body. And this is gluteus maximus. So for all of these reasons, we have one specific issue, that most of nowadays humans most likely cannot activate gluteus musculature enough. And very effective and strong gluteus musculature generally is very beneficial for us, both for everyday activity, but especially for athletes. For example, you see on this slide, this is the fastest woman in the world. She's the 100-meter world record holder. And look at her, of course, she's very strong, but look at her gluteus muscles, It's very strong because she produces most of the forces with this region. If you have strong gluteus, you have improved body posture, you increase power and strength, and you decrease injury rate and pain incidence. And not just in glutes, but in all over the lower body. As one famous physiotherapist said, whenever you see injured muscles, look for weak synergists. So most likely, for the most hamstring injuries, maybe it's not the hamstring that is responsible for being injured, but this weak synergist, too weak gluteus muscle. So what we know from study findings, that increased strength of this gluteal region brings acceleration and maximal speed in straight line sprinting, enhances. It enhances explosive strength, agility and quickness. It enhances acceleration and maximal speed in lateral movement patterns, not just straightforward. And it will enhance also deceleration in lateral, backward, and rotational movement pattern, as well as vertical jumping ability. So, what can we say? It seems that most of the human population, even athletes, have one syndrome that is called gluteal amnesia. And this is the reason why maybe before every training session, or almost every training session, we can use some drills to activate glutes and to remind glutes how to work properly in order to produce enough force during the main part of the training session. With some of the well-known drills, you can see them on this slide, and they are very, very effective. There is even one suggestion that maybe we should use them daily. We can spend some 5 to 7 minutes every day for glute activation and strength, and enjoy numerous benefits. This is a well-known procedure in the first part of the training session. So we can use some swinging or bouncing movement to extend the range of motion and flexibility. The force of the bounce of swing is gradually increased, but should never become radical or uncontrolled. And we can use 8 to 12 repetitions approximately to enhance the activation of the glute muscles. After we use gluteal activation, we can use dynamic movement patterns that we know now for 20 or 25 years. So I will not discuss this in details. But after this dynamic warm-up, there is one interesting part of the warm-up procedure that is called the movement preparation drill and neural activation. So what is basically this all about? Well, before we are starting sport-specific movement rehearsal, maybe it's a good idea to remember basic movement patterns. You know, from the general theory, like from general preparation period, you should not use, in training theory, you should not use sport-specific drills if you are not using in previous mesocycles general preparation period. And you can draw some line between these two sentences considering warm-up. So maybe before start using sport-specific drills, it's a good idea to rehearse some basic movement patterns, and after that to produce high-intensity activation of central nervous system before we are starting our sport-specific activities. So this is the general idea about the movement preparation, and I showed you on this slide a few examples, some lunges or some squats or some other basic movement patterns that we should do in 1-2 sets for the couple of repetitions in order to rehearse how to stand, walk, lunge, squat properly before the sport-specific movement. And after, when we did this, there is one other part of the warm-up procedure called neural activation. Let's try to repeat everything again. We do foam rolling again first, then we do active static isolated stretching, then we do glute activation, then most likely we will do dynamic stretching, then we will rehearse our basic movement patterns. So we did everything for the periphery, yes? What is else to be done before we are starting sport-specific movement? Well, maybe we have a need to activate also our neural pathways. And this is the reason why we could use these neural activation drills. What are they consisted of? Generally, very high intensity drill for 2 or 3 seconds with the maximum frequency rate coding of neural activation. Maybe skipping spot, or foot fire, or something similar, or jump over the line with highest frequency possible, diagonal reach, and something else, or something similar, couple of times, 2-3 seconds, and then we are ready to start some sport-specific warm-up. And this is the last part of our warm-up, so sport-specific warm-up. Now, everything that we do in previous part of warm-up, now we bring this to the specific movement pattern, to specific technical and tactical aspects, and we will rehearse neuromotor pathways in the context of the specific movement patterns. And this is the last stage of the warm-up. It is different from sport to sport, but the general idea is the same. To do some specific movement patterns that you will produce, that this athlete will produce in minutes to come during the game or the competition. And this is the end of the new trend of the warm-up procedure. And when you look worldwide, when you look on the YouTube or Instagram or wherever you look, wherever you can find some top-level athletes, if you check the way how they prepare for the game or the training practice, most likely you will see all or at least most of these stages of the warm-up procedure, because this is a new trend and most likely it is very beneficial. And this is one of the reason. Most likely why we have extended careers nowadays in top-level athletes. So at the end of the training, at the end of this topic, we can say the famous quote by Socrates: "It's better to change an opinion than to persist in a wrong one." So maybe it's a good idea to change our perspective of the warm-up and maybe to try this relatively new trend and to reap all of the benefits that it can produce for us. Thank you very much for being with me these 20-25 minutes, and hope to see you in the weeks to come.